Hello, I'm Dr. Sheila Dyer and I'm a naturopath here in Toronto, and today I wanted to talk to you about insulin resistance. So maybe you've heard of insulin resistance if you have diabetes, or maybe you've heard of it as you've kind of read some posts about intermittent fasting or keto or some of the other trendy kind of health fads out there. But it is something that I see often. Often people in my practice will have insulin resistance if they have diabetes, or maybe if they have PCOS. But it is something that comes up often, and it is something that I love to treat, so I thought I'd share a little bit more about it here in this video. So what's insulin? Let's start there. Insulin is a hormone that's released by the pancreas, and it's what helps you get your blood sugar out of the blood and into the cells. So you eat a big meal, a huge rise in blood sugar. Insulin is the signal for your blood sugar to kind of get into the cells, and therefore you can use it and create energy. So insulin signal blood sugar into the cells. So then what is insulin resistance? So insulin resistance is when your cells kind of no longer respond to that signal. So your cells kind of are just like, no, I've heard it 1,000 times before, insulin, like I'm just not going to listen to you. And blood sugar can't get into the cells. So if your cells are resistant to that signal, they're no longer answering, then what you end up with is you actually end up with a lot of blood sugar kind of in the bloodstream, as well as insulin, because insulin is still pumping it. You actually pump out more insulin in order to kind of get that signal across. So you end up with high blood sugar and high insulin, which are both things that you can test and look at in your lab work. And either your naturopath or your family doctor will kind of look at a couple different markers, and we can actually look at how you may be sensitive to insulin. So we've talked about what it is. What does it look like? What symptoms might you have if you have insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance, sorry. The signs and symptoms of insulin resistance are the signs and symptoms of diabetes. They really go hand in hand. So some of the symptoms, like the 3 cardinal symptoms of diabetes, is you're always hungry, bottomless pit, never satisfied, always thirsty. No matter what you do, you can't get rid of your thirst. And then number 3, you have frequent urination. So those are the top 3 kind of known symptoms of diabetes or uncontrolled diabetes. And then some of the more kind of advanced symptoms, if you've had uncontrolled diabetes for a long time, then you might see things like improper wound healing, like your wounds they're not healing. You might be prone to infections, you might be tired all the time. And then you also might have pins and needles sensations kind of in your feet or in your hands, but kind of mostly in the feet is where we see it. But I wouldn't tend to see those unless somebody has pretty uncontrolled diabetes and they've had it for a while. So those are kind of the symptoms. How did you get insulin resistance, right? What causes it? And again, just like the symptoms are the same as diabetes, kind of you run into the same causes as well. So kind of poor eating, unhealthy habits like eating lots of processed food, lots of sugar, and then you couple that with kind of inactivity, so that sedentary lifestyle that we talked about. Those are some pretty main drivers in how we get to insulin resistance. But then some of the lesser known one would be an unhealthy microbiome. So microbiome is just a fancy term that talks about all the different bacteria species that live inside your gut. And a really robust and diverse microbiome is linked to lots of different healthy, lots of different ways in which it benefits our health. And the research here is kind of exploding, and so it probably deserves its whole separate video to talk about microbiome. But if you have a healthy microbiome, you do tend to see benefits in terms of how you respond to insulin as well. And then Another cause is if you have kind of a lot of fatty acids circulating in your system, which is really just a circuit marker of kind of that unhealthy diet that we were talking about. And then lastly, you might have lots of inflammation, and that could be also driving, like inflammation, oxidative stress. Some of these things can also be driving you towards insulin resistance. So you have insulin resistance. What do you do about it? Hopefully you watch this video. And then also hopefully you speak with a naturopath, somebody who can really help guide you. There's so many voices out there, there's so many opinions, and at least my approach is really not fancy. Like, there's nothing fancy about this. It's really just, let's do the hard work and hit the ground running. So what do you do about it? What are the naturopathic treatments for insulin resistance? Number one, eat your vegetables. Like, it sounds so simple, and it is, and it isn't, right? We all know this. We've known it since we were kids, and yet we kind of miss the mark often. So you need to be eating probably 8 to 10 servings of vegetables a day, which is kind of blows my patients' minds. And then eating a diverse range of different colors. You want all the different antioxidants, and you get a little bit of different plant compounds from different colors. So eat the rainbow also sounds really simple, and like we learned it in kindergarten, still appropriate. It's very true. And then fruits and vegetables, I always put a caveat that you can't actually just eat 10 servings of fruit. Your body will not thank you for that experience. So I would say to eat 2 vegetables for every 1 fruit, right? 2 to 1 ratio, and then you're getting all the diversity that you're kind of looking for. So the second thing that you can do to help reverse kind of insulin resistance is fiber. And fiber, there's soluble, insoluble. You don't really need to know any of that. Some of the really good sources of fiber are kind of lots of vegetables, flax seeds, and then also things like apples, oatmeal, and then legumes. So things like lentils, chickpeas, all of that good stuff. Those are really good sources of soluble fiber that can help with insulin resistance, but they also help with making you feel full. They really help bring down your appetite. And then they have a nice side benefit of helping you reduce cholesterol. So all around, eating more fiber, it's pretty good for you. And then we're gonna kind of segue into some of the cooking spices that you can use that you might already have in your kitchen that have been shown, the research really lines up with kind of these 3 spices lead to lowering blood sugar or becoming more sensitive to insulin. So number 1 that I always reach for patients is cinnamon. Cinnamon's tasty, it's easy to add to your diet, and it can directly reduce blood sugar. So we're not talking about becoming more sensitive to insulin, we're actually it can directly reduce blood sugar. Do you need a lot of cinnamon in order for you to see an effect? Yes, but adding some into your diet is just a nice healthy choice. So second spice, turmeric. I feel like everyone's talking about turmeric for good reason. It has a lot of great science behind it. And one of the things behind it is that it can help reverse insulin resistance. Probably it also helps with your liver, and it helps with inflammation. Again, it's one of those topics that has a lot of research supporting it, and I could probably talk about turmeric for a long time, so I will stop. And lastly, we come to fenugreek, which is, I don't know anyone who has fenugreek in their kitchen, and possibly that's a cultural thing. It's definitely not in my kitchen. I don't cook with it. So if I'm going to use fenugreek, I would reach for a supplement or an extract if that's the route I want to go. And then lastly, one of the best things that you can do for your lowering blood sugar, but also all around health, is to have a good night's sleep. And any of my patients will tell you that I'm pretty passionate about sleep. It's an area that I like to focus on. I do think that on a whole, a lot of people don't prioritize it enough. But we all know that if you don't get a good night's sleep, then you're kind of crashing the next day, and then you reach for the chocolate, reach for the sugar, reach for the coffee. So it's almost like it's an indirect thing, but having a good night's sleep helps you keep to some of the healthy eating habits that in turn help you reverse some of your insulin resistance. So I'm going to leave it there for today, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out. My email is in my website. My website is in the comments. But I hope that you learned something, and I hope to hear from you. Okay, bye for now.